Hello, I'm Tim Shoebridge. Welcome to this video. Just a quick video about the Behringer UBXA, the one you can see behind me here. The UBXA is a 16-voice all-analog synthesizer, and 16-voice analog synthesizers are a bit of a big deal. There's not that many of them. I was going to say you could count them on the fingers of one hand, but you actually don't need all the fingers of one hand to count how many there are in production today. And there's a kind of a reason for that. They are expensive to manufacture. You have to worry about all kinds of sort of like complexities with them, like temperature management, the ability to auto-tune your oscillators or to retune them, recalibrate them on demand, that kind of thing. So the UBXA is a 16-voice all-analog synthesizer. And so, okay, fair enough, you don't really need 16 voices, but one reason why 16 voices is fantastic is if you've got the ability to do splits and layers, as in it's a multi-timbral synth. Now, it just so happens that the UBXA is a multi-timbral synth. It's a bi-timbral synth. You can layer two synth engines on top of each other, or you can split them. Now, I'm not particularly interested in split keyboard mode. It's a performance mode, isn't it, really? And I'm not a performer. I'm a recorder. But I do love the ability to layer sounds, to get some really more sort of like complicated, evolving pads and, you know, sort of like some stuff that's going on there with a little bit of rhythmic, sort of like arpeggiation, that kind of thing. So what I thought I'd do in this video is to just sort of like give you a very sort of like brief walkthrough of the layering capability of the UBXA, because we've got 16 voices of polyphony, which means that when we layer two synth engines on top of each other, we've still got an 8-voice polyphonic synth, and that is a big deal. So let's get stuck in. Excuse my back being turned to you, but here we are. I've got this little patch going on here. It's called Plink. It sounds like this. A little bit of arpeggio, a little plinky sound. Now, I'd like to know what that would sound like if I had a nice kind of sort of like mellow pad going on as well. So I think this could be a good candidate for some layering. So how do we do layering? So here in this keyboard section here, we have 4 buttons. The lower and the upper are ways of accessing the two synth engines that you have either in layer mode or split mode. So you can choose between which synth engine you want to either choose a preset for or play around with the front panel controls and change it. So that's what those 2 buttons are. And then we have the split and layer buttons. Well, layer is called double. It's not called layer, but just forgive me, I'm always going to be calling it layer. So we want to go into layer mode. Now, just before we do that, you'll see that I'm playing around with a preset here. It's a normal preset, and it's got my full 16 voices of polyphony behind it. And you'll see the display there. We just see the preset that I'm playing around with. Now, as soon as I go into layer mode, that light comes on, and one of the layers is now selected. It's by default the upper layer, and we'll see that the screen has changed. Now we can see a little D on the top left-hand corner. That stands for double. You'd see, I think, S if it was a split. So D is for double, and then you see my same preset that I had before, but it's there twice. It's actually by default chosen as the upper layer as well as the lower layer. And I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's a little dot that's a selector next to the top one. So if I change to lower, you'll see that the dot goes down to below it, and upper it goes up the top. So that's what we've got. We're now in layer mode, and we have the one preset that I was playing before, both in the upper and lower layers. So it's going to sound pretty similar to what we had before. So let's choose a different sound for one of my layers. So I'll leave my plink sound for one of the layers, for say the upper layer, doesn't matter which I choose. Let's go to the lower layer, and I'm going to choose a different sound. Now the way that we choose different sounds is with these preset buttons here over on the right hand side. You know, the way that layering works and splits works is that it's basically just a way of referencing two other presets that you've already stored. When you sort of like change the sound and sculpt it and make it sort of like unique to you, you have to make sure that you save the underlying presets that the layer preset is pointing to. The layer preset itself does not store the values, all the synth parameters. It's the actual regular presets themselves. Now you can see that the little selector is showing the bottom, so we're on the lower layer, and now I can just go around with my preset button and I can choose a different layer. I could hold down the shift key and press these to change the bank, but as it is, I'm just going through and selecting different presets that I've already saved. Now I've got a few little pads here, as you can see. Let's go with pad number 3 and see what that sounds like. It's actually a pad that kind of cuts off. I forgot what it was doing. Let's choose another one. Let's go with pad number 2. Oh, it's quite a bright, loud one. Let's try pad number 1. A little bit more subtle, isn't it? But I think that pad sound is too loud in comparison to my little plinky sound. Now there's a way of changing that, and it's this balance control here, top left in the manual section of the UBXA. And as I turn it more to the right, I get the upper layer. As I turn it to the left, I get more of the lower layer. Right, so let's assume that we've got a layer, we've chosen the presets, we've played around with the balance, and we really like what we've got. We want to save it. How do we do that? It is fairly straightforward. It is very straightforward, actually, once you know what to do. Now, we have the right button here. Now, this right button is used to save your regular presets, but you use it also to save your layers. Now, unlike regular presets, which are in banks, the layer presets themselves are not in banks. There are 35 of them, and with a layer, which is a double, sorry, in the correct parlance, it's a double. There are 35 locations, and they are numbered D1, D2, D3, D4, all the way up to D9. And because there's only one character or one digit that we've got after the D, then after 9 it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way through to Z, or Z, depending on where you live. So we have these 35 locations. So the way that we save a layer, once we've got one going that we like, is we use the right button, but we have to keep it held down. So I'm going to hold it down like that, and you'll see that the display changes, and it's prompting us for a location to save our layer into, and it's by default starting at the beginning, D1. Now we can change which location we want to save it to with the preset value buttons. So as I go through, you'll see D3, D45, all the way up to 9, and then it changes A, B, C, D, all the way through to Z. Now it's showing at the top there what we're going to be saving as a layer. I'm going to be saving preset A127 and preset A119. You can see it's got the lower and the upper preset. That's what I'm going to save to. What it's not showing me though is what's already stored in these locations, and I think that's a bit of a shame, because actually I don't know what I'm going to be overriding by doing this. So I'm going to save it to DA, because I know that I haven't got anything there yet that I'd like. Now I'm still holding on to that right button, and to actually save to the location that I've chosen, what we have to do is press down with the select button. When we press down, we're doing what it's showing as a flashing statement there. So confirm. If I press down, yes. If I don't want to save, then I can turn this select control and it says cancel, and then I can press down and cancel what I'm doing here. I'm going to save it there, so it's on confirm. Press down on the select button and it's saved it. So you see there we have the slight sort of inconvenience of saving to a layer location, a D location, and we don't know what's already in that location. So how do we look at these locations? How do we choose one of these 35 locations, either to see what presets have been chosen for it and actually what it sounds like? Well, that's what we use the select control with when we are in layer mode, when we're in double mode. You'll see that the display at the moment has got the little D top left, and then we've got the two presets that we have chosen so far. If I turn this select control, you'll see that below the D starts to appear a digit, a character or a number to show what location we are looking at. So we've got 1, 2, 3 all the way through, as you can guess by now, through to 9, and then A, B, C, blah, 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 blah. Now it's flashing, which means it's not doing anything yet, and if I don't do anything within a few seconds, it stops flashing and goes back to what I had before. If I want to select a location and actually listen to it, then I have to press down on this select button. So I'm going to choose a layer that I've created before. Let's go with number 1. Press down the select button. I've chosen number 1. You can see that that's what we're referencing. So I've got a completely different layer going on here. I've got that same plink preset as before, but I've got something called smoke. Now when you start creating your own layers and saving them, put that on hold. When you start creating your own layers and saving them, one thing which will disappoint you that you'll realize is that the balance control, how you've balanced your two layers, that is not saved as part of the layer preset itself. Unfortunately, it would be really cool if it was saved, but it's not saved. It's also not possible to modulate it, because actually the layer preset itself has just got a reference to the two presets that you want, and which is the upper, which is the lower. That's all it's got. You can't sort of like go into a mod matrix that is specific to a layer. The mod matrix settings are in each of the presets, and they don't know that they're in a layer, if you know what I mean. So don't ask for the impossible. We can't modulate the balance control, but it is a shame that it doesn't get saved when you save a preset. However, there is some good news, and that is that the performance section over here, bottom left of the synth, that does get saved as part of your layer settings. So I've got this little layer going on here. Wouldn't it be nice to have a little bit of vibrato on that kind of decaying pad sound? Let's try it. So in the performance section here, we can choose what the LFO is modulating. In terms of a layer, we've got the option to modulate the lower or the upper, or both, or none. So I'm going to choose just the lower, which is where my little pad sound is. I've chosen a waveform, which is the triangle wave. I've got the rate going how I want it to be. Let's just turn up this depth control and see what it sounds like. I like that, it sounds nice. What we do down here with this performance section, because it is relevant to layers or splits, doubles or splits, because it is relevant to them, these settings do get saved with your layer preset. So your layer preset is the two individual presets that you're choosing for your upper and lower layer, and these performance control settings that you have made. Those get saved on a per layer basis, which is really, really cool. So that's really it. That's all I wanted to really show you in this video. It's a very, very simple and straightforward capability, the layering capability, but it really is very, very powerful. I mean, do remember that the architecture of this synthesizer is quite basic by modern standards. So the kind of patches that you can create, the kind of presets that you can save are quite basic. Obviously use your imagination and come up with some wonderful and interesting sounds, but you have got a limited number of LFOs, envelopes, oscillators, waveforms, etc. However, that's why layering can be really helpful. You can take two quite simple sounds and put them together and come up with something quite a lot more complicated. I also feel that if you are someone who's a little bit tentative about programming this synthesizer, and it really does need to be programmed, but if you're a bit tentative about it, then there's still a huge amount of mileage you can get out of just taking the existing factory presets and trying out different combinations of what works well together. Do remember that the balance control will not be saved, so you have to always, once you load a layer preset, then fiddle around with that balance and get the sound that you want. It would be great if you could modulate it, and you can't, but then that's what our left hands were designed for, grabbing hold of it and turning it. There's a lot of fun in doing that. What else can I really say? Not a lot. I think that in terms of the layers that I'm putting together, whether it's this synth or actually any other synthesizer, try and think of complementary sounds, and I mean that in the same way as complementary colors, right? Complementary colors are actually very different from one another, but when you put them together they look pleasing, and it's a similar kind of thing with sounds. Think about complementary sounds. So a very sort of like soft, warm, dull sounding pad, but apply that and combine it with a little tinkly kind of high frequency sound, a little arpeggios, that kind of thing. Those kinds of things can really help to create interesting layers. Obviously you've also got control over the stereo panning. It is a shame that you haven't got control on the front panel over the overall panning of the two layers. I haven't found it in the manual, and I don't know if it's possible. It would be really cool if you could do that, but I haven't found a way to say, okay, I want my upper layer to be sort of like panned towards the right and my lower layer to be panned towards the left. I'm going to investigate that further and see if you can actually do it, but I haven't found a way to do it. But you do have control over the stereo panning of each of the presets that you place in your upper and lower layers. And that's what I just want to go play out with you. I'm going to play out with you a little example that I've done. I've got a very, very simple pad. There's a little bit of filter cutoff modulation going on with an LFO. And as well as panning. Now what I've done is I've taken that exact same preset, copied it to another location, but then I've flipped the phase of the LFO. And so what you get when you put those into a layer is you get an interesting stereo effect going on in terms of the panning and in terms of the filter cutoff modulation that's going on there. So I'll play you out with that as just an example of what you can do, but it really, you know, the only limit is your imagination when it comes to layers and putting together presets and coming up with a whole load of different combinations that work well together. And remember, of course, you have 16 voices of polyphony, so you've still got an 8-voice polyphonic synth when you're playing those two totally separate synth engines on top of each other. It really is a load of fun.